Good afternoon and welcome to the Cabinet meeting of Melton Borough Council. Members are reminded that we will be using the audio-visual system this afternoon, and the meeting will also be streamed live on YouTube. Members are asked to physically raise their hands in the usual way, excuse me, to indicate they wish to speak and to use their microphones when speaking for the benefit of all present. Please switch mobile phones to silent. I will now provide a reminder of the evacuation procedure. In the event of having to evacuate the council chamber, please leave by one of the 6 emergency exits around the sides of the chamber. Please assemble at the far side of the front car park, nearest to the park entrance. Officers will be on hand to assist persons who require any assistance. There is legislation that allows the public to film, record, or use social media at a council meeting. This must not be disruptive to the good order of the meeting, nor include any filming or recording of the public seating area. So we move on to today's agenda. Apologies for absence, none received. It's 100% attendance. Thank you very much. To confirm the minutes of the Cabinet meeting on the 25th of January, very happy to move them.
I'm happy to second them, Leader.
Thank you very much, Councillor Graham. Has anybody got anything to say amendments wise? No, thank you very much. Number 3, declarations of interest. Doesn't seem to be any, but other than myself, where I have a personal interest due to being a county councillor, and this is on record for any matters which relate to Leicestershire County Council. So moving on to the meat of the agenda, item 4, matters referred from Scrutiny Committee in accordance with the Scrutiny Procedure Rules. The following items have been referred from the Scrutiny Committee in accordance with the rules, and I now hand over to Councillor Bob Child, who is the Scrutiny Chair, to present the report. So over to you, Bob.
Thank you very much, Leader. Yes, we met on the 24th of January to consider the various budgets for next year and also later years. All members were invited to attend the Scrutiny Committee meeting to ensure that no one was excluded from providing feedback on the budget proposals. All members were actually invited. Prior to the meeting, Scrutiny had held a workshop in order to review the budget proposals, and that was held on the 3rd of January. Outcomes from the meeting. I asked the Director for Growth and Regeneration the reason for the backdated service charges, which were item 4.1.4, relating to Parkside and Phoenix House, and how that has arisen. The charges total respectively 100,000 and 139,000, which is not included within the budget and is recoverable, and had arisen due to how the charges were managed historically. When recovered, this will significantly improve the budget position and mitigate the budget deficit. A query was raised on whether the 142,000 NNDR cost recharge to the contractor for occupation of Lake Terrace under the terms of the lease would be paid. Members were informed that it is subject to ongoing discussion, but were hoping for a positive response. The question was asked, in light of the challenging financial situation the council finds itself, why was it deemed appropriate to create the post of Assistant Director overseeing the Shared Prosperity Fund? Members were advised that the role was necessary to ensure corporate oversight of the UK SPF plan, and were assured that the role is an amended role and does not represent an increase in headcount. In addition, the difference is fully funded through the funds received from UK SPF. The issue of funding for staff vacancies was raised, as well as the impact of hiring interims to temporarily fill those vacancies were having on the budget. The committee were informed that the vacancies are budgeted for, and where interims are hired, budget considerations and affordability are taken into account. It was also highlighted that the sector is facing recruitment challenges in key areas like planning and environmental health, and it was not prudent to simply repeat recruitment processes that had been unsuccessful previously. Consideration was therefore being given to different options, including shared arrangements, and whilst these were being developed, interim arrangements would be maintained. Concern was raised regarding the cost to the council of replacing vehicles. It was explained that these had reached the end of their economic useful life and were now incurring higher maintenance costs. A replacement programme is in place based on estimated useful lives of the vehicles. Concern was raised regarding employees taking vehicles home each evening and the additional revenue costs in fuel and wear and tear this incurred. The Director for Housing and Communities and the Director for Growth and Regeneration are committed to reviewing the situation and provide a detailed response. Following a comment regarding the underspend of disabled facilities grants, officers confirmed that any underspend may have to be returned to the provider, which could impact the total funds of 681,000. Although officers are going to look at innovative options for how these funds could be used, whilst remaining in line with the grant conditions. Concern was raised on the voucher scheme to provide tenants a one-off payment to assist with the cost of living and how this was to be managed and the audit considerations. The committee were informed that the Director for Housing and Communities and the portfolio holder for Housing and Landlord Services will spend time in reviewing and understanding the good practice before developing a policy for the council. Comment was made that the council can and should be acting more decisively when recovering garage rent arrears, which currently stood at 18,000. The concern was raised on whether capital investments on council-owned homes will provide sufficient reduction energy use and carbon emissions. Members were informed that the council is committed to achieving climate change targets and that have been committed to, but there is a trade-off to be made between reducing the emissions and reducing costs for tenants. It was also reiterated that the council will only be able to mitigate the full carbon impact from its housing with the support of government funding. The chairman asked that an action plan be developed in respect of climate change and presented to scrutiny at the next meeting. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Child. Certainly a number of us were there that evening, as you're well aware, and I have to say, personally speaking anyway, I was impressed with the thoroughness of your scrutiny. So at this point, I'd like to hand over to Councillor de Wilde, just say a few words in response.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'd like to thank Councillor Child, Chairman of our Scrutiny Committee, for the important work his committee undertook to scrutinise the proposals in front of us this evening. Both the working group and the formal committee, in my opinion, did an excellent job by engaging in a productive and constructive debate, which provided with some really useful and positive input, which subsequently fed into and informed the final process of what we see tonight. So, Robert, thanks very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Graham.
Councillor Child, thank you very much for this report. I wonder if you could just help me on the first bullet point, which raises its head again later on in our agenda, page 88, 4.14. There are two significant amounts outstanding of 100,000 and 139,000 respectively. Could you enlighten me on how we're getting on collecting those amounts? Thank you.
Yes, certainly, Councillor Graham. The £139,000 is due for payment next week. So we're fairly optimistic that that is going to be realised, and the officer concerned has got it in his diary to check the situation by the end of next week. The 100,000, I'm going to refer that to the Director of Growth and Regeneration, because there may be more complex answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Child. Yes, Councillor Child is correct. The 100,000 which is referred here is, I think, in relation to Phoenix House. That number still needs to be reviewed and double checked, and I haven't got it in front of me. But in terms of the process, we are still in commercial negotiations with the occupiers, and that amount hasn't been invoiced yet. The 139,000, the invoice is out and the payment is due soon.
Just to clarify, the 100,000 has not even been invoiced yet.
That's correct.
Are we therefore happy including it in this report? I thought that we were just waiting for the money to come in. But if we haven't issued an invoice, do we know who we are going to invoice?
I would have thought we knew. Sure, I'll just refer that again to the director, but I would have expected an invoice certainly be by the end of the month, because the longer it drags on, the more likely it's not going to be paid.
As I say, Councillor, it is being discussed with the occupiers, and yes, of course, we will endeavour to issue the invoices as soon as, but the amount needs to be confirmed first.
That's great. Thank you very much. Could you keep us updated on how things progress?
Absolutely, yeah.
And thank you very much, Councillor Child, for the answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Councillor Child? Okay, it just remains for me to say thank you. Call you Bob at this point, Bob, for the whole report, and the Cabinet have regard to your scrutiny feedback and to confirm that the Cabinet have noted your report. So thank you very much. Wonder what that sign was for a moment then, sorry. Moving on to item 5, the revenue budget proposals 2023-24 housing revenue account HRA. I turn to the Director for Corporate Service to summarise the report, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader. So this report presents the HRA proposed budget for 2023-24, which results in a proposed average rent increase of 7.21%. The year-end position for the current financial year is indicating an overspend of around 208,000, which will result in an increased draw on the reserves over the original budget. The reason for this overspend are all set out in the report, but are primarily due to inflationary pressures and the impact of void repairs on expenditure and income, with this being mitigated by increased investment income. The forecast position on capital is also contained in the report, and this shows a much improved position over previous years, with a modest underspend primarily relating to the acquisition of affordable housing. The proposed budget for next financial year, 2023-24, provides for a rent increase in line with government policy. With a net transfer from the reserves, this provides for a balanced budget. In line with the Housing Revenue Account Business Plan approved earlier this year, the working balance is increased to 1 million as a result of these proposals. The report also contains capital proposals for the coming year of 2.592 million, and these are all in line with the approved asset management plan, and the 5-year rolling capital programme is enclosed at Appendix C. The report sets out the various reserves that are in place with regard to the housing revenue account, and I confirm that I'm satisfied with the robustness of the estimates based on the information available to me and the adequacy of the reserves and balances based on the approved HRA business plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I now turn to the portfolio holders for Council Homes and Landlord Services. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Leader. Just basically to say that it's good to be in a decent position around housing. The last number of years we were not in this position, but just to make it clear to our tenants out there what we're doing and why we're increasing our rents at the level that we are, is that 7% will be in general needs and 11.1% will be unsupported housing. That's within the government guidelines. Inflation running at the highest levels for numbers of years. We've had to basically take a hit in relation to our repairs and maintenance contractors and contracts, etc. And to do that and be able to upkeep the quality of works and improve our homes, we need the income to do so. And I would like to thank the officers in both the finance teams and the housing teams of working collaboratively together of actually making this happen and showing quite clearly to our tenants why we're doing it, what we're doing, and the benefit to our tenants. But there's a good news story here also in the last year. As I said to Councillor Child, who challenged me at full council a number of months ago, would we spend the capital budget in line with what we predicted? And actually we're going to spend 5.4 out of 5.8 million. Bit short, Robert, but we're nearly there. And I'll tell you what, there's it's been a long time coming. But also where our expenditure is really important, and why we need that income is to keep our tenants safe. Compliance, which wasn't there, is now there. We can keep them safe. If you go around the town, you'll see our flats have got the fire alarm systems, they've got the bins in secure storage areas to protect them, etc. Really important. We're carrying out our repairs. We've improved our day-to-day repairs contractor. The performance is improving. Our voids are turning around quicker. We're getting people into our homes. And on the back of that, we're reducing the time in which people are in homeless accommodation. So it's really good. Going on to the energy efficiency and the climate change, absolutely right. What the director was saying is that we have to, and what Councillor Child was saying is we have to mitigate off the impact upon our tenants. So what scrutiny did around challenging us and looking at, could we take storage heaters out and put gas in and thus reduce the cost to our tenants and give them a heating source that's actually more sustainable in regards to their incomes, etc. Absolutely great. And again, the role of scrutiny that's played there has been fundamental. And as well as having to increase the rents, what we've also done is we've worked together to set up a hardship fund, and our hardship fund will be targeted those who really need that support. So maybe if somebody's struggling with gas, electric, food, clothing, etc., we'll be able to help them. So hopefully they'll be able to maintain their rent and thus not impact upon our rental income and increase our arrears. So we are thinking about the mixed bag, and this is a long-term plan within a 30-year business plan that if we can keep to and keep on track year on year on year, it sets the council in good stead and allows us to do things that we haven't previously been able to do, such as acquire and build new council homes. Although at modest levels, it'll be very important to thus help impact and mitigate strains upon the general fund, such as increased homelessness, if that does come to us at any stage. But a good news story there is that actually we're not seeing the increased levels that we maybe had expected. And again, that gives us a little bit of room to get on and develop things. And finally, what I would like to say is our tenant engagement. We've reshaped and refocused our tenant engagement, and we're trying many different multiple channels in which to do that. And our tenants have been involved in this process. Director of Housing has had the tenants in with her staff, etc. And the feedback that I've had from the tenants, although they know that it's been a difficult decision around the size of the rental increase, actually they know that actually things are starting to have improved. They're going to improve further, and they're going to play a big part in the future of their own homes in the borough. So I would just like to end there, Leader, and if Councillor De Boer wanted to add anything on the back of what I've done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. I turn to the portfolio holder for corporate governance, finance, resources, Councillor De Boer, to move the recommendation and provide any further introduction. Over to you, Ronnie.
Thanks, Chairman. Would you like me just to read the recommendations or say anything else?
Do what you think best. The important
Okay,
thing is
no,
the recommendations are here. You could just simply say no,
it's fine.
recommendation 2122.
It's fine, thank you, because Ronan said an awful lot on the subject. Right, okay. So I'm happy to support the recommendations that Cabinet notes the financial position on the HRA as at the 30th of November 2022 and the year-end forecast for both revenue and capital. Right, and also recommends to Council that the budget estimates for 2023-24 be approved at 2.1, at 2.2, an average rent increase of 7.21 for all council dwellings be approved with effect from the 1st of April 2023. 2.3, a hardship fund be developed for the benefit of those tenants in need to a maximum of 50,000 and for awards granted to be in the form of vouchers. 2.4, the 2023-24 capital programme be approved. 2.5, that delegated authority be given to the Director for Housing and Communities in consultation with the Director for Corporate Services and the portfolio holder for Council Homes and Landlord Services to approve environments within the HRA capital programme during the year to provide flexibility to meet emerging needs and maintain decent homes. 2.6, that delegated authority be given to the Director for Housing and Communities in consultation with the portfolio holder for Council Homes and Landlord Services to finalise and implement the policy and criteria for a hardship fund for tenants. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Brown, are you seconding?
Yes, Leader, I'm happy to second. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Brown. Now I'll hand over to members if they've got any questions or queries. I don't believe they have. So the recommendation has been moved and has been seconded formally. So I ask you all to raise your hands if you're in favour. Unanimous, as noted. Thank you very much, Democracy. We move on to item 6, the capital programme and capital strategy. So I turn to the Director for Corporate Services to summarise the report, please.
Thank you, Leader. So as well as reporting progress on the current year's capital programme for the General Fund, this report puts forward for approval for submission to Council the Council's capital strategy, which covers all Council funds. The strategy sets out forward capital projections over the medium term and strategic aspirations and must be considered by the Council alongside the budget and associated reports. And it links to the Treasury Management Strategy later on your agenda and the revenue budgets elsewhere on the agenda as well. No proposals are put forward with regard to special expenses, and the capital programme for the Housing Revenue Account Services was dealt with in the earlier report. The proposed funding is also set out within the report, and you'll notice that the funding and the proposals for the General Fund is fairly modest, reflecting the availability of funding. The programme proposed is primarily focused on IT replacement projects and environmental maintenance vehicles funded from repairs and renewal funds, and also grant-funded private sector housing improvements. And also the formalisation of funding already set aside for further work on the asset development programme. It should be noted that with regard to the environmental maintenance vehicles, it is recommended that the greater portion of this funding is approved for the current financial year, and that's to enable orders to be placed and fulfilled prior to the growing season. The capital strategy recognises the limited availability of funding for the General Fund projects and the potential need for this having to be met by borrowing in future, which would have a revenue budget impact if that was to happen. Following the approval of the HRA business plan and asset management plan, this has been used to inform the capital strategy in respect of long-term capital plans for this fund. The recent General Fund stock condition surveys will also need to be used to develop a General Fund asset management plan, which can then be used in future to inform this capital strategy and be considered alongside revenue funded available for repairs in order to assess the ongoing affordability of future asset needs with regard to the General Fund. Thank you.
Thank you very, very much. I now turn to the portfolio holder for corporate governance, finance and resources, Councillor de Bell, to move the recommendation and provide an introduction.
Thank you, Chairman, once again, and thank you, Dawn, for that comprehensive overview report. Members, in summary only, following the report that Dawn has just made, The proposed expenditure on IT recognises the need to keep our IT infrastructure up to date and remain resilient. It's a vital function that we do. Work has been undertaken by officers during the year to assess the needs of the environmental maintenance service in terms of asset replacement and the affordability of these, and it's good to see these reflected in the programme. In addition, the long-awaited HRA business plan and AMP, the Asset Management Plan programme, is now informing our capital strategy, and these documents now all align and are informing the budget as they should do. Our lack of capital funding and need to generate further revenue, as set out in the previous report, demonstrates how important the asset development programme is to our future financial sustainability. And there is provision made in the proposed programme for this to develop further. Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to move the recommendations. At 211, the addition to the 2022-23 General Fund capital programme of a further £104,000 for environmental maintenance vehicle replacement programme funded from the Renewals and Repair Fund. At 2.1.2, the removal from the 2022-23 General Fund capital programme of £550,000 of LAD3 MEH Sustainable Warmth Budget. At 2.13, the reduction in the 2022-23 General Fund capital programme of £62,000 on property condition survey works. At 2.14, the General Fund capital programme for 2023-27 as attached at Appendix B. At 2.15, the sources of funding for the General Fund capital programme for 23-24 as set out in Appendix C. At 2.1.6, delegated authority to be given to the Director for Corporate Services to amend the amount in the capital programme for disabled facilities grants once funding confirmation has been received as referred to in paragraph 5.9. 2.1.7, the capital strategy 2022-23 as attached at Appendix D. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Do we have a seconder?
Yes, I have pleasure in seconding. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. Does anybody have any questions or queries of Councillor Bell or even the Director? No. Okay. I ask you to raise your hands in those in favour of the recommendation. Noted. Thank you very much. Moving on to item 7, which is the General Fund Revenue Budget 2023-24 and the Medium Term Financial Strategy 24-25 to 26-27. So I invite the Director for Corporate Services to summarise the report, please.
Thank you, Leader. So the report sets out the proposed budget for General Fund Services, and the outcome of the decision this evening will be forwarded to the full council meeting later this month, when the council tax is formally set for all the parishes and precepting authorities as well as our own. I'll just highlight some of the key elements, appreciating it is quite a weighty report. So with regard to the current financial year 2022-23, as we've already heard, the finances for general and special expenses have been quite a challenge this year as a result of the high inflationary pressures and also reduced income from planning fees and leisure, as well as one-off costs of enforcement. These have been mitigated by increased investment income. And these inflationary pressures and income pressures, they do continue into next financial year 2023-24. The forecast for general expenses this year is now for a largely balanced position with, as we've heard on the scrutiny report, some one-off income arising from backdated service charges to tenants, and also retained business rates for renewable energy sites also backdated. The forecast for special expenses Melton Mowbray, however, remains in a deficit position. And there are recommendations provided for adjustment to the reserves to accommodate these over or underspends at the year end. With regard to the finance settlement, the final settlement, as members will be aware, has now been received and provided for a large change in the amount of £1. So there's no changes that need to be made to these figures before they go to council later this month. The settlement was for another 1 year with principles for the following year. And this did see a slight increase in resources for next year over 22-23, but below inflation, with districts faring the worst out of all of the local government sectors. The referendum limit in the settlement is for the hire of £5 or 3%, with a 2.99% overall increase proposed in the budget. There has been lobbying from the sector to provide for a higher monetary value as part of the settlement, but unfortunately, this didn't materialise. There is a delegation there is a recommendation in the papers which the portfolio holder will propose a slight amendment to, and that does provide for a delegation for me to amend anything before we go to council, with one of those amendments being the drainage levies, which we've received and are slightly higher than are in the papers in front of you this afternoon. So moving on to the proposed budget for the next financial year, again, it aligns with the corporate strategy, which I think is in the final year now of delivery, and that was approved in September 2020 and takes into account as well the Council's State of Melton debate that was held in September 2022, and you've got at Appendix A an updated position on that. The budget proposals include one growth proposal for each of general expenses and special expenses Melton Mowbray, and that covers conservation resources and also improvements to the cemetery to extend its life. From the table in paragraph 451, it can be seen that the proposals result in a deficit of 141,000 on general expenses and 96,000 for special expenses Melton Mowbray, with the proposals being that these be met from the reserves. You'll note in the report as ever that there's a number of assumptions that have had to be made and the various risks that are associated with these assumptions. And the proposed budget sets out the mitigating actions that will be taken to help reduce some of these risks. Unfortunately, no contingency has been provided as part of the proposed budget due to affordability. So any increases that occur or reduced income will have to be met from savings elsewhere in order to maintain the balanced budget. One of the highest risks to highlight is that the budget does assume that the contractual management fee from the leisure operator will be received in full next year. So that's quite a risk on the budget. With the current pressures on the sector from rising energy costs and also a sector still recovering from the pandemic and an ageing facility, this is not just a high risk, but it's also one that is increasing. You'll see in the report there's forecasts for future years, which have been drawn up against a background of great uncertainty regarding inflation and also future funding levels. And as such, you'll see as well, there's some sensitivity analysis that we've applied there, and that does result in quite wide ranges with regard to what those forecasts might be. With regard to the budget for next year, relying at this stage on the use of reserves to balance, members will note this is not sustainable long term, and therefore a financial sustainability plan is being developed and proposals will be brought back to members in April, which will seek to mitigate that actual and any forecast deficits in the MTFS. You'll see as well the position on the reserves is set out in the report with the key ones highlighted in paragraph 4.10.1. And you can see there that the key unallocated reserves for the council is the corporate priorities reserve and the special expenses reserve, and they're projected to be at 592,000 and 126,000 respectively. When you consider these levels alongside the current and forecast deficit, this highlights the importance of the financial sustainability programme being realistic and achievable. The budget proposals also address the Local Government Association recommendations to increase the working balance to £1 million, representing the minimum level of reserves that the council should hold. I am required to comment on the robustness of the estimates and the adequacy of the reserves, and on the basis of the information available to me at the present time, the information provided by budget holders and subject to the risks set out in section 9, I'm satisfied with these. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dawn, for a detailed introduction. I turn to the portfolio holder for corporate governance, finance, resources, Councillor de Burgh, whose voice is still holding up.
It is just about. Thank you, Leader. Yes, thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Dawn. It was quite a long and detailed report. So thank you for that. Colleagues, as you're aware and have heard, the Council's finances remain extremely challenging. I'm really grateful for the work our officers have done during the recent period to pull the forecast for the current year from what was originally a large deficit to what is a broadly balanced position now. This has not been achieved lightly without recourse to using reserve. Fortunately, this will leave our reserves in a better position in terms of level, which, if forecasts are right, we are going to need to address the ongoing challenges we will face in balancing the budget in 2023-24. It's not an ideal situation. However, the forecasts highlight just how precarious our future position is looking. I can't stress just how important the financial sustainability programme will be to our future success. It's essential that it produces a realistic and achievable plan. In this context, it's important we maintain our momentum on the asset development programme, which will identify potential for generating much needed revenue and capital resources. This will be key to maximising assets, which will feed into our financial sustainability programme. We also need to recognise that this is not a short-term programme. We will still need to look elsewhere for savings to address the immediate gap in our finances. Our budget pressures are not just limited to general expenses. The proposed budget provides for investment in extending the life of our cemetery, and we need to be prepared for the necessary financial implications of that in the near future, should we decide to extend the current provision by way of a new cemetery. Thank you, Chairman. I couldn't see it then. Thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to move the recommendations in this report that Cabinet note the year-end forecast and financial position for the General Fund and special expenses for 2022-23. At 2.2, note the proposed budget for 2023-24 and delegate authority to the Director of Corporate Services to make any amendments necessary to the estimates prior to their submission to Council for approval. At 2.3, approve the special expenses policy attached at Appendix C. 2.4, recommend to Council, subject to any amendment arising from the final finance settlement. Don't think there's going to be one. From that, 2.4.1, the revenue budget for 2023-24 for general and special expenses as set out in Appendix B and summarised in section 4.5 be approved, resulting in an overall council tax increase of 2.99%. The individual council tax levels being as set out in paragraph 4.5.5 of the documents you have. At 2.4.2, that the council continues to disregard 100% of any widowers or disablement scheme, armed forces compensation scheme payments in any benefits assessment. At 2.4.3, any underspend on general expenses at the 31st of March 2023 be used to increase the current level of the working balance in order to move closer to the target level of £1 million Dawn has already referred to, and any overspend be met by reducing the budgeted transfer to the Regeneration and Innovation Reserve for any further shortfall being met from the Corporate Priorities Reserve in order to maintain the current level of 850,000. At 2.4.4, that the general expenses working balance be increased to the 1 million level recommended by the LGA in the 2023-24 by transferring 150,000 from the corporate priorities reserve. At 2.4.5, any surplus stroke deficit for special expenses Melton Mowbray be transferred to or from the special expenses reserve, thereby bringing the actual working balance back onto target. And finally, at 2.4.6, members to note the changes made to the risk categorisation of budgets as set out in paragraph 4.8.1 and Appendix E. Thank you, Chairman.
Leader, can I just confirm for Cabinet that the amendment that, or the slight refinement to the recommendation that Councillor de Burgh has offered? So on 2.2, the reference to the estimates being subject to the final settlement has been removed, because obviously, as the Director has mentioned, the settlement has now been confirmed. And also on 2.4, the recommendation to Council was no longer subject to any amendment arising from the finance settlement, again for the same reason. So just to reassert that this is slightly adapted recommendations. Thank you.
That noted by democracy. Yeah,
Okay.
thank you. Councillor Graham.
With those two amendments, I have pleasure in seconding. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Any queries or questions for Councillor de Burgh? If not, I move it to the vote. All in favour? Thank you very much. Noted, democracy. Thank you very much. So we move on to the Treasury Management Strategy and Prudential Indicators 23-24, and I hand over to the Director for Corporate Service to summarise the report.
Yeah, thank you, Leader. So again, another document that will be submitted to the Council alongside the budget at its meeting later this month. And it is a requirement that this is scrutinised in advance, and the Cabinet is responsible for undertaking that scrutiny. The document links to the capital strategy and capital proposals that you've already considered this evening on this agenda. The indicators contained within the report are split between the General Fund and the Housing Revenue Account. The suite of indicators have been expanded to include indicators of affordability in line with the Housing Revenue Account business plan, which will be tracked and then used to assess the affordability of any borrowing proposals within the Housing Revenue Account. The other main change is the inclusion of a new performance indicator, the liability benchmark. With the General Fund being debt-free, this is relevant to the Housing Revenue Account only at this time. And this shows that the HRA actual borrowing is below the liability benchmark and is expected to remain so after any refinancing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dawn. Turn to the portfolio holder for corporate governance, finance and resources, Councillor de Burgh.
Thank you again, Chairman. Again, thank you, Dawn. I'm happy to propose the recommendations in this report. Whilst quite a technical paper, the various indicators and supporting narrative demonstrate how well we do manage the Council's finances in a prudent and measured way, which has been demonstrated to consistently produce the best outcome for the Borough of Melton. They show how cash flow is managed to good effect and how well we have managed our investments and borrowing in a challenging environment. As has been referred to in previous reports, with rising inflation, it is important we manage our cash flow well and maximise our returns from investments, as this has and can mitigate the rising costs we are facing from inflationary pressures. Mr. Chairman, I'm very happy to move the proposals, recommendations to Council at 2.1, that the prudential indicators and limits are adopted and approved as outlined in Appendix A, Section 2. 2.2, that the approval of the Treasury Management Strategy as outlined in Appendix A. 2.3, the minimum reserve provision MRP statement, which sets out the council's policy on MRP, is approved as outlined in paragraph 5.4. And finally, at 2.4, notes the linkages to the capital strategy due to the integral nature of how the council manages its treasury finances to support capital development. Thank you, Chairman.
I have pleasure in seconding it, Mr. Leader. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Graham. Any questions or queries for Councillor de Burgh? I look round. If not, will you please raise your hands if you're in favour of the recommendations that have been proposed and seconded? Thank you very much, members. Noted by democracy. Thank you. Moving on to item 9 on the agenda, which is the corporate debt write-offs. And I should have to say that this item does contain an exempt appendix. However, we will only go into exempt session if members wish to discuss anything that is exclusively mentioned within the appendix. If we do go into exempt session, there will be a short pause whilst Democratic Services ensure we are not broadcasting. So I hand over to the Director of Corporate Service to summarise the report, please.
Yes, thank you, Leader. So the purpose of the report is to seek approval to write off debts over the value of 2,500 where there's little or no prospect of recovering them. And also I'd like to acknowledge the delay in submitting the report, which we would normally undertake on a quarterly basis. And the reason for this delay is that the revenues team's focus has been on administering several grant schemes for business ratepayers, also test and trace payments to the public, and also energy payment schemes during and post-pandemic. As such, the level of debts submitted is higher than normal because no debts over the required limit have been submitted to Cabinet since June 2021. Although I must assure members that lower level debts have been written off under delegated authority during that time. It also should be noted that there is a risk that debts write-offs are likely to increase in the future given the current economic climate, as residents find it harder to pay their taxes. The report provides the background to collecting the debts and the steps that we've taken to collect them, which is in line with the Council's corporate debt policy, whilst also having regard to individual customers' circumstances. The policy acknowledges that there are some circumstances where it may be necessary to write off a debt, such as if a debtor is bankrupt or a small debt is uneconomical to pursue. As has recently been demonstrated to the Scrutiny Committee, the Council has a good track record of collecting council tax and business rate debts, which has resulted in a top quartile performance in these areas in both 2020-21, 21-22. You'll see in the report the total debt being considered for write-off is in paragraph 4.3, and this amounts to £223,054, and the individual debts, as the leader said, are in exempt appendices. It should also be noted that the level of proposed write-offs is relatively low when compared to the annual council tax debt raised of 46 million and also business rates annual debt of 20 million. Paragraph 5.5 for members' information does set out the amount written off since 2018-19, both by members and under delegation, but this is the year of write-off, not necessarily the year the debt relates to. Paragraph 5.2 also sets out the work that the revenues and benefits managers undertaken in respect of write-offs, and this includes new written procedures that detail the steps and documentation required before a debt can be considered for write-off. This will improve transparency and also the audit trail relating to write-offs. As a result of these new procedures, I will also be asking that the delegation limits being reviewed in March 2023 as part of a review of the Constitution, and that should enable a better process for write-offs to be undertaken more flexibly and in a more timely manner. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dawn. I turn to the portfolio holder for corporate governance, finance and resources, Councillor de Burgh, to move the recommendation and provide any further introduction to the report.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you again, Dawn. Members, I support this recommendation. There is so much one can say about debt in a benevolent society. We all know it. However, the facts are that, sadly, that some debts are just not economical or possible to collect. And in these cases, we need to take the necessary steps to write the debt off to keep our accounts in order. I recognise that it is a difficult decision to write off debts, but on the plus side, we can then have an accurate understanding of what our collectible debt levels are and can focus our resources effectively on collecting it. Scrutiny have undertaken a review of this area and recognise the need for us to keep on top of writing off debts that should be written off. Against that background, I'm content to move the recommendations at 2.1 and 2.2, that the Cabinet notes the action taken by the Council to recover outstanding debts, and at 2.2, did I say 2.2 for a start? Beg your pardon, I'll recap. At the Cabinet notes at 2.1 notes the action taken by the Council to recover outstanding debts, and at 2.2 approves the write-off of the debts shown in appendices 1.4 or 124. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Councillor Graham.
A pleasure in seconding it, Mr. Leader. Thank you.
Any queries at all? We would have to go into exempt if so. No, okay. Thank you very much. Recommendations have been moved and seconded. For those in favour, raise their hands. Thank you very much. Right, we move on to item 10, which I believe is the last item on the agenda. The Asset Development Programme update, proposals for diversification of the Parkside offices by way of a proposed new hotel development. Again, I will say that the item does contain an exempt appendix. However, we will only go into exempt session if members wish to discuss anything that is exclusively mentioned within the appendix. If we do go into exempt session, there will be a short pause whilst Democratic Services ensure we are not broadcasting. So I hand over to the Director for Growth and Regeneration to summarise the report. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Leader. The Asset Development Programme was launched in April 2020 with a very clear steer from the Council's corporate strategy as well as the capital investment strategy to develop our assets for maintaining their, maximizing their potential to generate income as well as benefits for the wider community. The LGA Finance Review conducted in 2021 also recommend to take a hard-nosed view at our assets to generate commercial income. We received grant funding from LEP in 2020, backed by a detailed demand analysis in 2019, and an initial assessment of all our assets, including Parkside, Phoenix House, the Cove Community Centre, the leisure centres, as well as all the vacant and unused land within council ownership at the time. The report in front of the members today focuses on Parkside and the development options considered for the development of this particular building going forward. Now, this report is based and informed by a range of alternative uses considered as identified in paragraph 5.4.2. The uses considered include the residential, the commercial development, as well as hotel development. There are a few criteria taken into consideration, including deliverability, financial viability of the appraisal, the risks the council could get exposed to, but also based on the demand and need for a particular use within our area. Now, looking at all the options which are taken into considerations and looking at the demand analysis in 2019 as well as the previous one in 2015 done at a Leicestershire-wide level, we know that there is an identified need and demand for more accommodation for hotel use within our area to support the proposed growth for our tourism economy. Now, the consultation also undertaken with the town centre residents as well as the stakeholders last year in preparation of the town centre vision document identified the need for a hotel to support the larger events within our town centre, as well as the coach operators coming to the town could spend overnight stays for larger groups within our town centre. Considering all those evidence-based support and looked at the initial consideration for various design options and the costing related to that, the summary of which is identified in the indicative financial model in the exempt appendices. And looking at all that evidence, we are suggesting here that such development of a hotel could be financially viable, but there is more work to be done in terms of looking at the procurement, looking at the market testing, and giving certainties to the number and the assumptions made in the indicative financial model, which is presented in the report. So the report here proposes to undertake further work, particularly in case of procurement, and give more certainties to the assumptions which are made in terms of creating these recommendations as part of this report, and come back to the council and cabinet for further approval in 12 months' time. Looking at the live interest from the commercial providers within the hotel sector currently, it is also looked at that we need to look at a wider economic impact assessment to understand the impact on the town centre as well as the wider tourism economy for the area. Finally, the section 5.5 highlights a series of consideration which will need to be reviewed and considered at future stages of any work done through the asset development program. But I'm here to take any questions regarding any of those considerations highlighted in the report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pranali. It falls to me to say a few words now. And it's worth reflecting, actually, that Melton is on maybe at the start of the biggest economic growth we've ever seen in Melton Town. Could be in the region of £200 million or even more. I've read in the a report once, I think it was on the MMDR, creation of 6,000 jobs alone for that. Melton is going to grow, there's no doubt about that. Something we've been working for to bring prosperity to this area. It's only right for me to say at this very early stage, there are revised recommendations, and I will read those out so everyone is clear. 2.1, note the progress made on the asset development programme, which is referred to as ADP. 2.2, reaffirm the need to diversify the Parkside office in accordance with the aims of the ADP, which seeks to reduce costs, increase income, and support the local economy. 2.3, confirm the council's interest in further exploring the option of accommodating a hotel on part of the Parkside office's site, but prior to progressing with the procurement and more detailed financial and legal appraisal, request the following be provided in a subsequent report to the June 23 Cabinet meeting. 2.3.1, a summary of the detailed analysis of alternate options identified in the report and their implications for the site. 2.3.2, provision of an economic impact assessment for the options considered, including the hotel. 2.3.3, any further soft market testing, that may be required to support the analysis. When we approved our corporate strategy in 2020, we included a commitment to make better and more commercial use of our assets to cut costs, generate income, build homes, and create jobs. I tend to call, that's quite a mouthful, I tend to say, sweat our assets. That is the focus of our asset development programme, getting the most from our resources for the benefit of the community. Since 2010, cuts in public funding have seen our annual budget reduce from 6.7 million to 5 million. That's a 40% cut in real terms, whilst at the same time demands on our services have gone up. And I won't mention the ravages of inflation at this time. To remain financially sustainable and avoid massive cuts in service, we have to keep innovating. It costs this council over £500,000 to run Parkside every year. That's a big chunk of our 5 million general fund budget, and every pound spent here is one less we can spend on delivering services to our community. Since the County Council left 18 months ago and the adoption of remote technology, we, like so many other organisations, need less office space, and therefore maintaining the status quo is not an option and does not represent good value for money. Recognising this, in the update of the ADP we received in April last year, full council made an explicit commitment to explore commercial options for greater utilisation of Parkside, so we could cut costs whilst also boosting the local economy. Since then, we have been reviewing options which seek to strike the right balance between costs and benefits for both the council and wider community. This work was supported by our scrutiny colleagues through a workshop in November last year. The report summarises this analysis, and without doubt, the hotel represents an exciting and innovative option that should be explored further. This is, though, an important decision and one we must get right, so I am going to propose that we build on the options appraisal already undertaken, and before proceeding to the next stage, bring back the more detailed analysis on the alternate options considered, including a full economic impact assessment, so we can be assured that the direction we ultimately take does give us the best chance of delivering what we need. In proposing a revised set of recommendations, I will request that a further report providing this additional information is brought back to Cabinet in June, and we can consider before progressing any further on the hotel. It's worth reminding everyone that any final decision on what we do will be reserved for full council, and that if we want to remain financially sustainable whilst also supporting our town, we will have to keep pursuing innovative options which cut costs, protect local services, and grow the economy. Doing nothing is not an option. On this basis, I am proposing to replace the recommendations, as I said earlier, and I will read the recommendations again. To 1, note the progress made on the asset development programme. To 2, reaffirm the need to diversify the Parkside offices in accordance with the aims of the ADP, which seek to reduce costs, increase income, and support the local economy. To 3, confirm the council's interest in further exploring the option of accommodating a hotel on part of the Parkside offices site, but prior to progressing with the procurement and more detailed financial and legal appraisal, request the following be provided in a subsequent report to the June 23 Cabinet meeting. 231, a summary of the detailed analysis of alternative options identified in the report and their implications for the site. 232, provision of an economic impact assessment for the options considered, including the hotel. 233, any further soft market testing that may be required to support the analysis. Thank you very much for listening. I turn to Councillor Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Leader. I have much pleasure in seconding those recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Graham. I look to anybody who wants to say a few words. Councillor Bindloss.
Thank you, Chair. I haven't got a lot to say, to be totally honest, but one of the things I would say and reiterate is obviously that I support the recommendations and that we are at this particular point at the verge of some very exciting possibilities for the future of Melton. And with that, we need to make sure we make the right choices. It's equally clear, and again, I'm saying something that's already been said at least once, it's equally clear that we address the issues that manifest themselves from the under occupancy of Parkside. And with that, I look forward to a robust proposition to be brought before us in the near future. Thank you.
Councillor de Bell.
Thank you, Chairman. I applaud the changes that you're proposing. I think it's right. We do have to look forward and maximise on every opportunity, but it's also right that we are cautious in the way we're looking at it. And I think the proposals you've just put forward are the right ones to put forward, and will do just that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Freer.
Thank you, Leader. I'm happy to support the amended recommendations. I think when you thoroughly read the financial reports that we have been voting through this evening, it's important that we look really carefully and scrutinise what we're going to do in the future. But I also think it's important that we include everyone on this journey with us, because this will be a full council. This will be a council-wide decision that will go forward into the future. So I think those amended recommendations support that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Freer. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, again, I support the amended recommendations and just really like to point out that when we go back to when this building was first occupied, and I was one of the officers who used to work here along with Rob and with Dawn, etc. Life was very different. You know, we commuted into work every day. We need to do that. You don't need to do that now. I work for a national housing association, and you know, 2 days a week you have to go into the office or travel. You can do a lot from home. Unfortunately, that's the way the work environment has changed. So when we hear people say, you know, why do we not need the building? There's good reasons for that. And actually, we're putting more staff out on the ground, front facing, collecting rent. What I mean by that there is going and dealing with those issues, dealing with antisocial behaviour, dealing with social care issues, etc., safeguarding. You're not going to do that in an office. You actually have to be out on the ground to actually do that. And that's probably one of the reasons why the County Council made the decisions that they did so. But more importantly, it's about utilising the resources we have to realise additional monies to ensure this council's got the resources to protect the more vulnerable people in society and try and grow our businesses and basically support those businesses to diversify within the town, because Melton is changing like many other city centres. The days of traditional shopping, etc., will not be there. I go around the country to places like Whitney and Stratford, etc., and it's a leisure offer. People want to go to the football match, they want to go to the cinema, they want to go for a meal, they want to go out and enjoy some music, etc. And our high streets are changing, and we need to get this right. So I really, really welcome that, and want to put that message out. And I think if we can get something right here, it can actually go to what you just said later. In addition to that 200 million, this could actually get more people into town to hopefully spend, and that's what we want them to do. We want them to spend in our local businesses.
Thank you very much. Any other hands up? Okay. I've moved the recommendation at 2122, 23, 231, 232, 233. You did second, didn't you, Melise? All those in favour, please raise their hands. Okay, noted, Adam. Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of today's meeting. For those listening on YouTube, thank you very much. And for those attending and all officers, thank you very much.